Now, one of the most dramatic, important historical looks at the Reagan presidency has to do with his involvement in the Cold War. Um, we talked about in the last slide how he had reversed the trend of the 1970s détente, which was, let's be more friendly with the Soviets and China. Let's reach out to them. Nixon goes to Moscow, goes to China, makes these historic trips, this kind of softening of the bad blood from the 60s. Reagan isn't having it. Reagan starts his presidency with harsh rhetoric towards the Soviet Union. In fact, in a famous speech in 1983 during his first term, he referred to the Soviets as an evil empire. He thought détente was not getting satisfactory results and may have even strengthened the Soviets. For example, his predecessor, President Carter, had boycotted the 1980 Olympic Games. We didn't send our American athletes to the Olympic Games in 1980 because they were in Russia in protest of the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan, a Central Asian nation. Reagan believed that détente, in part, caused things like that it emboldened the communists. It made them feel as if they could be more aggressive in the world because, we were friendlier to them and so he really believed in keeping kind of an edge and kind of keeping an opposition to the Soviets. And he believed that we needed to continue our policy of containment and not allowing communism to spread anywhere in the world. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet Union was really struggling domestically. While it was continuing to have a dominant military, its people were not receiving the economic security and the wealth that other Western European nations were in the 1980s. The Soviets could, see broadcasts from other parts of Europe and just really see a contrast in the lifestyle, the comfort level, the wealth of the non-communist nations around them. And so that is a real issue in the Soviet Union, and they respond by appointing a new leader in Mikhail Gorbachev by the mid-1980s. And he was more of a moderate, reform-minded communist. He was more open to different policies that typically communists wouldn't follow. In fact, he institutes two policies, Glasnost and Perestroika, which introduced a more relaxed approach to the hardline totalitarian communist country that gave the Soviet people slightly more freedoms. And so these reform policies that Gorbachev institutes in the Soviet Union of openness were also coupled at the same time with less Soviet control over its communist allies. Remember that the Cold War really began when the Soviets created this kind of buffer zone, as Winston Churchill famously said in the 1940s, an iron curtain across Europe, dividing the communist East and the democratic nations of the West. And so for the first time in the 1980s, the Soviets, and actually going back, looking like at the Hungarians, at the country of Hungary in the 1950s, who had kind of stood up in a minor opposition to the Soviet Union. The Soviets just crushed them and crushed the rebellion and really kept a firm grip on those nations in the Eastern Europe. Well, by the 1980s, and especially under Gorbachev, they're starting to lessen that control. So they're giving the Eastern European nations, which are still communist, but they're giving them more of, control over their own destiny. So the combination of reform within the Soviet Union and less control of the Eastern European countries become very instrumental in the fall of communism by the late 1980s and early 1990s. Another key factor of the fall of communism and the end of the Cold War was Reagan's position of strength that he negotiated from with the Soviets in the 80s. He had a arms buildup. We were increasing the size and strength of our military. He even proposed a missile defense system that he called Star Wars, that he envisioned satellites in space that could shoot down long-range missiles carrying nuclear warheads from the Soviet Union. And this really terrified the Soviets that he might, and they believed him, that he might actually bring warfare to space, and that they wouldn't have, they weren't in the economic position and didn't have the ability to keep up with that kind of spending on their end. Sensing momentous shifts in history, Reagan, at the end of his second term, really stepped up the rhetoric to help bring a swift and surprising end to the communist reign in the Soviet Union and really all of Eastern Europe. Speaking next to the Berlin Wall, which was the dividing line between the free and communist Germany, he delivered these famous lines. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So that became really an iconic and important line within the speech of ending communism. And in fact, shortly thereafter, in the next couple of years, communism did fall in those countries. The Berlin Wall did come down, and we had the end of the Cold War. While Reagan's presidency was pretty successful, definitely the biggest black mark during his 2 terms in office was the scandal referred to as Iran-Contra. In that scandal, members of Reagan's administration had initiated a secret deal that would circumvent Congress, that would go around Congress in order to achieve some of their foreign policy goals. There was really 3 parts to the whole thing, 3 major parts. We would secretly facilitate the sale of arms to Iran, which is controversial to say the least. They were an enemy since the Iran hostage crisis, just a half a decade before. And at the time were a subject of a worldwide arms embargo. So nobody was trading arms with them, but we were going to do that secretly. Then we would turn around and use that money to help our policy of containment in Nicaragua. We would give it to the Contra rebels who were fighting to overtake the communists in Nicaragua and Central America. And then also part of the deal is we would negotiate the release of various U.S. hostages. So kind of shady, in a country that's supposed to be transparent, and these, major types of things that went against international law and international agreements was going on behind the scenes. The focal point of the whole scandal became Colonel Oliver North. He eventually became the self-confessed point man of the operation. But as the investigation continued, and there are a lot of these hearings that were broadcast to the nation through Congress, it was evident that members of Reagan's advisors were aware of the deal, even though Reagan had denied knowledge of it. Eventually, as more evidence came in, it suggested that top officials were involved, and Reagan admitted to the nation, in an address to the nation, that even though he did not have direct involvement, he may have been told of it and should bear the responsibility as the head of the executive branch for not really, stopping it or overseeing it, or paying enough attention, or whatever it might have been. With no direct link of evidence to Reagan, no formal impeachment charges were ever brought forth by Congress, and Reagan survived his major scandal in his second term, but it would stand as the biggest black mark on his presidency. So I just wanted to give kind of a quick overview of the fall of communism in Eastern Europe in 1988, 89, and 90. So basically in 1988, Gorbachev assumes full power in the Soviet Union, and while that is happening, his openness, his new reform policies seem to just kind of give the people a taste of what they want more of. And you start to see a lot of protests and nationalist movements within republics within the Soviet Union that weren't necessarily ethnic Russian areas, but were still parts of the Soviet Union, the country. And these groups are wanting independence. By 1989, you see this kind of spread to the Eastern European satellite nations like Poland, Hungary, East Germany. And by the end of 1989, the Berlin Wall literally falls as East Germans spill into Western Germany for the first time in decades. And then you get even further uprisings within the Soviet Union. Eventually, by 1990, the Communist Party votes to end one-party rule, and the communists are ousted, and Russia is no longer communist. So after Reagan's second term, the United States voters seemed to validate his time in office by choosing as vice president George H.W. Bush as the next president. It's the first time since the 1920s that America elected successive Republicans to the presidency. Bush defeats the former Massachusetts governor Michael Dukakis to win the presidency. And during his campaign, he boldly promises to not institute higher taxes, despite calls from a lot of people to possibly do that. The economy was starting to slow down. We were running these huge deficits. And he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And it works for him in 88, and he's elected, but unfortunately it'll come back to haunt him in 92 as he would break that promise. In his one term as president, he would raise taxes, and his challenger, Bill Clinton, in 1992 will emphasize this broken promise to the American people. So the Bush presidency ends the decade. Highlights include an extremely successfully swift victory in the Persian Gulf War, which was a war that we had against the nation of Iraq and its dictator Saddam Hussein. He had invaded the small but oil-rich nation of Kuwait, which was an ally of ours, and we went and successfully defended them and drove the Iraqis back out of the country. In an interesting twist of fate, though, Bush decides not to take our military all the way into Iraq and overthrow Hussein or force him out of power, and he remains in power, and I'll come back to have to deal with him in later units. Colin Powell, the picture you see here on the slide, is an African-American military general who leads the war effort and serves as the head of our military, as the head Joint Chiefs of Staff under George H.W. Bush during this time period. Bush chose two people to positions as presidents that really upset liberals, that became kind of controversial in those circles. First was Dan Quayle. He was the young conservative politician from Indiana that Bush chooses as his vice president. Quayle had attacked a famous actress, Candace Bergman, who had a TV show at the time, Murphy Brown, for glorifying kind of untraditional values, specifically single motherhood and sex out of marriage and those kind of things. And he kind of said that was signifying a sad time in our history to go against traditional values. And then Clarence Thomas was the African-American conservative judge, the first conservative African-American to be appointed to the Supreme Court, that had a controversial confirmation when an employee stepped forward and claimed sexual harassment. After a vigorous investigation, it seemed like this wasn't a trend or whatever, and he was eventually appointed to the bench. Also, Bush will endure the savings and loan crisis at the end of his presidency.